today it's the 74th day of the Raqqa front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I myself have been here for like 7 months now, and like the experience that I've had, it's been incredible. Like especially when I've seen the people coming from Raqqa, and especially the women and the older women, and they're in joys of like tears of joy. When they're looking at us and they're pleading, like, or they're saying thank you for liberating. And like it's my favourite thing to, like, it's better than fighting, is to see these women coming and kissing your hands and completely in love with who we are and that we're what we've done for them. And so this is like, it makes it all worth it, everything that we've been through, all the difficulties that we've been through together. It makes it worth it because we see what we're doing for the people.
And it's just because I've only been here for 4 months now. Like I've just arrived back after a bit of a break back at home, and just as you say, one of the best things that I saw recently, it was a couple of weeks ago now, because my position, a lot of the civilians have already left, but 20 civilians came past, and the first thing that my unit and the MFS and the YPG and the units across the road did was we ran out and brought them water where they hadn't drunk seemingly in days. These people were staggering, and we picked up their bags, we carried their bags for them, gave them water. They had a lot of children with them as well, which is just heartbreaking. And then we took them back behind the lines where they were fed and given shelter. It reminds me of what it was like before in Manbij and in Tiltama over the years that I've been here, and as I've volunteered to be in the YPG, I'm being continuously impressed by the humanitarian effort. And I know, particularly for you as an activist, to see the liberation of women, particularly in such a society against such an enemy, is just incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, I've seen there's a lot of Arab women that have, especially from Manbij, joined. And now they're with us, they're fighting, and I've even seen women that they've taken off their burqa, they've thrown their burqa. There was one girl who threw her burqa away and came to us and said, I want to join. Yeah. And it was the most incredible feeling. And you know, because it's not just that, okay, now they're fighting against the oppressor, the ultimate oppressor that have been there for 3 or 4 years under their rule. It's also that they understand the repression, they understand the patriarchy, and they understand the religious, the use of religious doctrine to oppress people, and also the capitalist system that uses people for profit. And so to see this transformation in the Arab women that have joined, this from the ultimate oppression under Daesh, under ISIS, to this level of understanding the world and understanding their place in the world, and in their own society, it's an incredible thing. And so when we're liberating these people, in the knowledge that what they will have in the future, they will have a democratic society with their own power in a system that is impossible for authoritarian regimes to come again, or any other oppressive regimes like Daesh to come again, because people are understanding the place in the world and understanding politics. And this is what the answer is for Syria. This is what the answer is for peace in Syria. And this is the only way, this is the only force that can do it, because it's the people that are joining, it's the people that are doing it. Yeah. And so this is why I believe in it so much, and I think that all the foreigners believe in it so much, is that they see what's happening and they understand what's happening, because we become part of it as well.
Yeah, and it's because you're absolutely right. That's another thing, because only about a month ago now, about 2 months ago, I joined the MFS, which is the Syriac community in Syria. They're a major part of the SDF, really strong allies with the YPG. After coming first in 2014 to join the YPG, spending so much time with them, it was just an opportunity came up. I was speaking to the leader of the MFS, I was speaking to a couple of YPJ and YPG commanders, and they were like, why don't you join the MFS? Why don't you spend some time with the Syriacs? Learn a little bit more about the revolution that's going on here. It's not just about the Kurds, it's about the Syriacs, the Yazidis, the Arabs, all different faiths, all different communities. And so for the past 2 months now, it's just been an absolute blessing to be on the front line with the Christians of Syria who've suffered so much, liberating because I think people forget this. They think that it's just an Arab city, but this is also a multicultural city where there's Christians trapped here, there's Yazidis trapped here, and being part of the Christian forces who are fighting alongside the Kurds, fighting alongside the Yazidi units as well, is just absolutely inspiring. And every single foreigner I meet, I've met so far in Raqqa, because I've lost a lot of touch with a lot of them, so I'm meeting them for the first time. They are, it's such an incredible experience to be here, to be part of a movement that is genuinely liberating people in two ways. Physically, by liberating them from Daesh, but also with ideology, liberating their soul, liberating their spirits, showing them that you don't have to live in a dictatorship, you don't have to live under a patriarchal society, that there is such a thing as true equality. And things like democratic confederalism, the shared vision that the SDF has for the country is just unbelievable.
Exactly. And so now we've seen this report that is by a think tank called
the Henry Jackson Society.
Henry Jackson Society.
It's a right wing, yeah.
And we're questioning who these people are, who this group is. It's clearly a private funded group. And so if we can give one call to the British public, it's to do a little bit of research on who are these funders. And this will give a lot of answers. But also, so what the report says is important. Like the BBC have reported on it and said that the YPG is a mask for the PKK. And the PKK is a violent terrorist group. And so we've also read this report and we've seen they've gone into a history of the PKK, which claims human trafficking and drug trafficking and terrorist attacks in Europe, which are completely non-founded. There is absolutely no evidence for any of this. And as a person that understands the ideology of the YPG, and also of the PKK, since we have the same ideology for democratic confederalism and freedom, that I can 100% say this is not true of the PKK, this is not the history of the PKK, and also evidence basis, there's no evidence. And so with this report, then with the BBC report, then they used the photo under the headline of that the YPG is terrorists. They've used the photo of the first British martyr, volunteer that was martyred in Syria under the YPG.
Which is personal to both of us.
Yes.
I guess that was insulting. That was, as soon as I saw that when you showed it to me, I was upset. To see a young British man who the Kurds loved. He loved Kurdistan, he loved Rojava. He was so sort of, he would only do what the YPG and YPJ were doing. He didn't want to wear the expensive boots that he brought over from Britain. He wanted to wear the local shoes. He wanted to wear the local uniform. He was the first person to volunteer for everything. And the Kurds loved him for that. And he was actually my inspiration for the work that I would later go on to do, just really talking about my experiences and try and actually show the truth, which is so hard to get across to people in the West. But to see that man who was a humanitarian, that had actually also, which is really insulting, he had already served in the British Armed Forces. And to say that this man was a threat, or to indicate, or to hint that he was a threat to British values or to Britain at all, is deeply insulting for a veteran, for a human being. So it's that was deeply upsetting for me personally, I'd say.
And then, so when we looked at this report, then it actually goes through every single person, every single foreign volunteer that has been martyred in this revolution, in this fight against ISIS. And so what you say about it being a slap in the face of humanity is right. That how dare they do that? Like, these people, what have we got to come here? What do we get in coming here? Really, what do we get? Like, do we have? Okay, you think some idealists can say that, oh, we're stopping ISIS, and so the threat will no longer be in Europe or America, but this is not really true. But as volunteers, we're coming here because we want to help the Kurdish people. We want to help the Arabs and the Yazidis and the people that are here, and the women and the children. We want to help them. And how can we help? It's by being here as one of them and joining them and learning about their ideas and who they are and what they want, and also contributing internationally to give their message out. And so to use their names, the people that have been martyred, to use their names in this report to say that these people are not humanists, that they're terrorists after they have died. It's a slap in the face of humanity, and it's something that I don't accept at all. And I think that the British public shouldn't accept this. Now we've had, 4 British volunteers that have been killed, and I have absolute respect for every single one of them, more than I have respect for anyone else. I mean, in Europe really, or anywhere, that it's like if you can give your life to something that actually doesn't concern you necessarily, then it's something to deeply respect.
Because one of the things that really shocked me was that simply for a start, the inaccuracies in the report, that they seem to be searching for a theme that unites all foreign volunteers, and certainly a common theme amongst the PKK and the YPG. They're just trying to blur the lines. And but what they don't understand is the rich diversity of the region, and certainly the rich diversity within the volunteers. Like, people come for different reasons. I came because I'm a humanist. I believe in democratic values. For me, it's been a journey of discovery, to be learning about the Kurdish cause, to be learning about the Kurdish democracy movement. I have to say, I didn't know much about the Kurds before I arrived, and I'm not Kurdish myself. So how does that fit in with the narrative that that Carl Alton, the writer of this report, is trying to put across? That this is a nationalistic movement. This is a movement that's trying to that is persecuting local groups, which is a joke. I'm sitting next to you with a Syriac patch on, a Christian patch, and this report is saying that that this is a nationalistic movement, that this is a PKK movement. So it's full of inaccuracies, but also just it doesn't give justice to the international volunteers who have, as I said, come for many different reasons, and are motivated truly by, as Che Guevara once said, great feelings of love, the true revolutionary. But it's almost a joke, this report. And I have to finish by saying this, actually, because it just reminded me of a report last year, which was about accusations of ethnic cleansing against the YPG and YPJ. I forget who wrote that report. It was certainly picked up quite widely by the British press and other newscasters, particularly in Turkey as well. And a year later, the YPG sent people, activists, to this group, to their London offices, I was included, and we said to them, look, we invite you to withdraw this report after submitting evidence that all of it was inaccurate, that it wasn't correct. Because we said, look, this is going to damage your reputation by publishing this. And sure enough, a year later, the UN, of all people, releases their own report saying that it was nonsense, that it just wasn't true. But how much press did that get? How much press in the UK and Turkey came out about the nonsense that was written? And I'll tell you what, give it 6 months, independent, objective observers, both in America, Britain, Kurdistan and other places, are going to tear this report to pieces, are going to butcher it. But as I said, how much will that be picked up in the British press? But
yeah, so and then also this report is then targets a few current fighters, including you and me.
Yeah, both of us.
We're officially terrorists, according to this right-wing private funded think tank. It's quite an achievement.
Yeah, well, it's going on my CV when I get back to the UK. But anyway, we'll have to see. But that's insulting. Again, it's insulting to both of us because they want to. I've been reading a few of the themes, and they like to paint they like to, as I said, group us together, the foreign volunteers. But people like you and me completely break that stereotype, because when we arrived, we were objective. You came as a journalist, I believe, objective journalist, just to report, to discover. And sure enough, you did discover, and you fell in love, and you decided to help. And it was very much the same story with me. But you and I come from different backgrounds. We come from different parts of the country. But we came to the same conclusion, that the YPG and YPJ are wonderful organisations with an ideology that is genuinely progressive, that is going to unite Syria and solve many of the problems in the Middle East. So, yeah, it is a joke, isn't it?
Exactly. And really, like, I invite the British public or the public all around the world to learn more about the YPG and the YPJ, the ideology behind it. Okay, we're not the PKK, this is not the PKK, but you can read the ideology behind the PKK, you can read the history behind the PKK, and you can make your own assumptions of what this is. But there is no evidence behind it, and I will, for one, I am not a PKK member, but I will say that the PKK are not terrorists. This is a politically aligned goal by the Turkish state, who are actually the terrorists. They're the ones that are killing the people here. They're killing the people, their own people in their own country. And I mean, this is what the media, the capitalist media, won't report on because of the amount of finance that the Turkish state and Turkish companies give to outside media. We need to ask, people outside need to ask these questions like, why is this happening? Why are these reports like this? And why is the YPG now being attacked as being the PKK? Why is it now? Is it because it's coming to the end of the Raqqa operation, and they want to change the tide on who the YPG is, how we actually influence people outside, how we influence people's perception of what democracy is. We look at Britain now and see how messy politics is, how many people do not believe in politics or in the political system, and so are they afraid of what influence the YPG is having on the people? And this is what people need to ask. They need to ask these questions: why? And I implore people to look for these answers. It's not so hard.
It's just I totally agree. For instance, the rise Turkey has always been a problem in Syria, and one of the crucial things that people need to understand, and it is very obvious when they look, as you say, if they were to do even the smallest bit of investigation, they can discover the truth. And the truth is, Turkey is a failed state. They've had a coup, which has then resulted in the president Erdogan clawing even more powers for himself. He's butchered the Kurds of northern Kurdistan. He's divided his country. He's imprisoned tens of thousands of people. He's alienating himself from the rest of the world with his aggressive, backward actions. And what's far more crucial, because that's the conflict in Turkey, and we mustn't let them blur the conflict that's going on in Turkey too much with what's going on in Syria, because that's what they would love to do. They want to just associate the YPG with the PKK, lump the two conflicts together, and use that as an excuse to intervene. But in Syria, Turkey is funding jihadist groups. It gives money to America, Britain, and the West's enemies. It funds terrorist groups against the YPG. They invaded Syria, and they took Jaralabas and a huge chunk of northern Syria, and they're not going to give it back. It's going to become a new Golan Heights. It's going to be, it's basically a bit of colonization of Syria. They've invaded, they came to take land, whereas the YPG and YPJ are attacking ISIS, which is a brutal, horrible terrorist group, liberating territory and then giving the power back to the people. I'm wearing a Syriac patch where the local Syriac people, the Christian people, are now part of Syria. They feel like they've got a shared vision, a shared future. It's no longer the Syrian Arab Republic. It's now the Federation of Northern Syria. Hopefully one day the Federation of Syria. So we mustn't sort of forget who the enemy is here. Who is more dangerous for peace? Who is the one who is funding terrorism? It's Turkey. And don't allow them to accuse the YPG and YPJ of anything other than what they're doing, which is liberating people. It's the one thing that I know upsets you and really upsets me as well.
Yep. And you can even just look very easily at the evidence that shows that Turkey has been funding ISIS almost since the beginning, and since the YPG took Manbij and therefore took the bridge from the border of Turkey across to across to ISIS, then the service line was cut, and for the weapons and the personnel to come across. And so since then the Turkish state cut from ISIS, and we've personally seen the morale of ISIS go down, and the actual like the products of them, like their ability to fight, their weapons, everything like this, so their consumption has dramatically gone down, and they've been losing. And so this is also evidence to show that ISIS were almost completely relying on the Turkish state. Yeah. And then now we look who is funded by the Turkish state, and it's small groups of jihadists all around in between Kobani and Afrin. Afrin is a place, a predominantly Kurdish place and Yazidi place in northeastern Syria that has been under embargo since the beginning of the Syrian war, and they're suffering, and because we can't connect these two places because of these Turkish-funded jihadists, that these people are suffering. And so people need to ask, what is the Turkish state doing? What is their role in all of this? Why are they doing this? And then they'll see the truth behind any reports like this. It's very transparent once you look through it.
Yeah, well, I think, as I said, it's an insult to us, both of us. I will go back to the UK to live. I am just an observer to history in the making, which is a revolution going on in Syria. As a British man, I feel honoured to help and to write about it and to participate actively on the front line. Has just been an honour for me, and I am continuously inspired by international volunteers who come from all across the world, who believe in democracy, they believe in secularism, they believe in an equal society, and they come here to fight. And then I'm doubly impressed by the people I've come to live amongst, who again are sacrificing their lives for a better future. Mm-hmm. And then you read a report by a right-wing blog, which is, or whatever, a right-wing organisation, which is picked up by the BBC and spread around, and it's not seen in its correct light, and it horribly misinforms people about exactly what the complicated history of the region is. So yeah, I just hope that people look at the two sides of the conflict here. Look at what's going on in Turkey between the increasingly the fascist state of and increasing authoritarianism of the Erdogan regime against the Kurdish people there, and the PKK struggle for democracy and for equal rights for Kurdish people in Turkey. Also, people should investigate, learn more about what's going on in Syria, what the YPJ and YPG are trying to achieve, and not allow people to confuse them, to lie to them, and instead liberate yourself and discover.
Exactly. And I think, like, personally, this is not it's not only like a thing for Syria or for Kurdistan. It's also like something that we can learn everywhere. This ideology, okay, you don't have to become completely under that ideology, but there's ideas for everybody. There's ideas for feminists, there's ideas for socialists, communists, anarchists, social democrats, Labour, I don't know, anything that is from the centre to the left. And there's ideas that bring about what is freedom and why freedom is needed and what is democracy and how we implement democracy. And I think that everyone should be reading this stuff and learning from it, and also look at what Rojava is and look how we're implementing it. This is an experiment that has never been practiced in history, like with women at the forefront of a revolution, a democratic revolution that is bringing peace to the most war-torn country in the world. It is beyond comprehension, and so why are people not looking at this? You need to look at this. You're not looking at it because the media doesn't want you to, because who is the media controlled by? It's controlled by the states and by these capitalist organisations that are our enemies, that don't want this to happen. And so people should really look towards what is going on here and learn from it. I can say personally that this is something that has changed my life, and okay, if I don't go back to the UK, it's because of the political situation in the UK, that it feels like they will literally imprison me for being a terrorist, and I don't want to risk this. And so again, I have to give up my own life for something that is for the other people, or for this place as well. Like, I can't continue my own life because of their misunderstanding and their stubbornness towards what democracy really is. And so I want people to really look at what is going on in Rojava, and look at the difference between the capitalist system and the Turkish fascism, Daesh fascism, and what the democratic Syrian forces are doing here in Syria and in Raqqa.
100% agree. It's and I think, me personally, if I'm going to go home and I'm going to look whoever stops me at the airport, I'm going to look them in the eye and simply say to them, do you seriously think I'm a threat to the British people? Do you really think I'm a terrorist? I have been, and for a start, it shows how horribly inefficient they are, since I've been back and forth between Rojava and the UK for a number of years now, and I've travelled all across the world, in Europe and in America, and I've been stopped by security services. But at the end of the day, I've been helping the YPG and YPJ, who are a democratic group that's not listed by anyone except for Turkey, as a terrorist group. The American people and the American government is hopelessly reliant on the YPG and YPJ to defeat ISIS. They've identified the YPG and YPJ as one of the main one of the best ways to liberate Syria. The only way. And the British government has always had a very hands-off approach to what's going on in the Middle East. Primarily because it's been distracted by leaving the European Union because of the recession. The country's been trying to get its own affairs in order, and it just feels weak and vulnerable as far as I can see. So they just don't want to get involved in the war in the Middle East. The trouble is they're also allowing our foreign policy, British foreign policy, to be influenced and directed by Turkey and Saudi Arabia. We roll out the red carpet to dictators from the Middle East, yet we don't supply direct support directly to the YPG and YPJ. They do to the SDF, which is all the same group, but they don't do it for the YPG and YPJ. So it's for me, it's just madness.
I think like they're saying that the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, are acceptable, and maybe the YPG is the PKK. You need to understand what the Syrian Democratic Forces are. It's an umbrella group, right? With the MSF, with the YPJ, with the YPG, with the Yazidis, with all of the different groups of religions and ethnicities, and the women always autonomous. And so they're trying to separate the SDF from the YPG, so then they can say that the YPG is connected to the PKK. And they're just trying to make it all confusing. There is one group in Syria that is bringing peace and democracy to this region, and it is the SDF, and we're all under this. We're all working together. Me and you, we're from the same country. We're in two different groups, and we're autonomous from each other, but we're working together. This is how it works in the SDF, and there is no other. You can't separate us. We're together in the fight against Daesh and the fight against any jihadist groups or any fascist regimes. And so people should understand this, and I think that
just educate themselves.
Yes, exactly.